Howdy folks, here's a few things I've been doing. So as promised, just little tidy up jobs. So these little odd corners that I described before in the front room, because we had the two different levels of the dining room floor and the living room floor, this was higher than that. And so what I did was originally I was going to do it so it sloped down, so this round bit matched into this bit. But that's a lot of angles because we've got this strange angle going in from where I've cut the wood, equally there. We then have a downward angle that way and a downward angle that way. So you're making some sort of weird trapezoid kind of shape. So I just decided to do what I've done here. And that was, I'll show you on the bigger one because it's easier to see. I just rounded it off into like a bull nose kind of thing. And then what I've done with this one, I've nailed it into the wall, into the old plaster here. And with that one, I just use a very strong adhesive on either side of the wood and then behind packed it with filler. All I've got to do next is just tidy in the little creases on the side and then give it a base paint. And that's that. Likewise with this one, done exactly the same really, but at a right angle. I'll just zoom in there. So I filled that with white filler. Like I said before, originally I was going to leave that wood to match in with the rest of it, but because the only filler I had was white, I've decided I'm going to paint that so it goes in with the skirting. And then we've got the spare room windowsill. Now I've already put it in place because I've done other stuff to show you how I've done this. This one I've actually done right. So what I did was I followed a friend of mine's advice and pretty much just thought through better the plans I'd originally had in the past. So what I did with this was I took the 4 measurements of the inside of the pad or whatever you want to call that, the windowsill, the old stone and stuff that was going on there. I then marks the very centre point of the front and the back, and then cut a bit of wood to the sort of size I wanted because I've got this little overlip here, so I cut it slightly larger. I then marked the centre point on the piece of wood and then measured half distance, so from the edge to my centre point, marked the point on there on the wood, on there, so we then had that measurement, the half measurement there, and equally at the back. So then we have the correct angle for these bits. Now I did cut this slightly smaller, but I intended to, purely because of the whole thing of wood expansion and contraction, particularly in a place like this, where there's a lot of draft coming through and therefore potential for moisture to come through. I knew that I wanted it to have a little bit of shrink and stretchability, so that's that. I then drilled down, just in 4 spots, where the original piece of wood that was set into the stonework and the wood and the brickwork and all that underneath there. So then I then squished a load of glue in there. Annoyingly, my wood glue, I ran out of my old glue, so I just got some other glue that I had in my old workshop. That was years old, I didn't realise how old it was, and I tried to squidge it out and it just came out congealed. So I just used some filler that I've used, not filler, sorry, some adhesive stuff that comes out like the silicone tubes that I used downstairs on the window, on the, oh, I really can't speak today, on the skirting board, that's the word. So I just did that. Annoyingly it's white rather than transparent, translucent and that. But that's fine, I'm not too worried because it's so deep in and there's a little bit around these bits of dowel which I've now cut down because these were about that tall when I hammered them in. I'm not too worried about that because I'm going to give this a nice blitz off with a sander. I'm then going to nice and tidy that up. Then going to varnish it. Once that's varnished, then put some frame sealant around the edge. And those are the next 2 jobs for in here. And just so you can see, there's a before. And here it is after. All I've got to do now is touch up the filler that's under there. Hopefully it's not too dark and you can see that. You can just see the colour change. So all along here, where the plaster finished and where it's actually sitting on the stone. So I've got to put some nicer filler in that and then paint over it. And then on this, all I've got to do is put some frame sealant around the edge to make it a bit more weatherproof. Howdy folks, well the next project we're getting now is going to be a coat hanger here. So the problem with this is a lab and plaster wall, so I've got a bit of fun to do with that fixing things too, but I'll describe that when we get to it. Big problem is with all the electrics here, so this is the unit and everything where the mains electric comes in, got the fuse board where that goes elsewhere. This piece of wood that it's fitted to is very loose to the old plaster, and I don't want to fiddle with that too much because that's just going to rip lumps of old plaster off. So really, it's the cables holding everything up. So what I'm going to do is put a big piece of wood, and this will be very clear once it's seen and done, because it's hard to describe. Big piece of wood going down that way. I'm going to build a little cupboard for that to go into with a door that opens upwards, and then I'm going to put a coat hanger rail thing there, and then down the bottom I'm going to have some shelves where I'm going to put shoes, and that's the building plan. So let's see if it goes to plan. Dad's helping me today, so you may hear him in a minute doing some cuts, because he's going to be my cutting monkey today. I've just measured between here and here, and I did it with a level on the inside. Now the reason for that is because I didn't trust that wall there to be level. Amazingly, it was. So from this point here to the wall was 65 centimetres, and then at the bottom, from the level mark from the top of the piece of wood to the bottom that I used, which was straight and I checked, that's also 65. So that's brilliant. So he's just counting that's length for me. And then what I'm going to do is going to go from ceiling to floor, and then to go around the little bit of skirting board there, I'm just going to cut out a little notch. Now annoyingly, this does belly in a bit. So it's got a curve inwards, a concave curve. So the piece of wood I'm using is that one on the floor to be the flat bit, the side there. So box it all in kind of thing. I would have to shape that, but instead, because it's quite a big gap and I don't want to fiddle around with angles, just want to get this job done, I'm going to use some quadrant along the edge to bend in, flex that on, stick that in place, and that'll be covering the gap. While Dad's cutting the little notch for the bottom of the brace that we're going to put on here, the bracket sort of thing, that's going to be glued and screwed to the wall. But for the bit that's going to be going across there, I'm literally just going to have basically a wooden shelf made of the same material as the same stuff as the side, which is what I've used on the TV stand over there. And that's going to be the brace going across. I'm then going to have a little bit of wood going across there that it can be screwed or nailed onto, and probably glued as well, and the same kind of thing here. So going along this bit of wood, if you imagine the piece of wood coming out here, that's going to be coming out all the way along for a support for the shelf to go on. It'll be attached to that and equally attached onto the side. So this will be nice and squarely braced against the whole wall. So hopefully that'll keep it nice and still. And then the same situation is down there where the shelves are going to be for the shoes to go on. That'll act in the same structural way. So there's our little bracket in place. Annoyingly, on the bottom a bit of paint came off because of the glue that's on the back of this wood. We touched it on there and then rolled it back just to see where the screws are going to be going, and then it just peeled a bit of paint off. And annoyingly, where this plaster is so thick, old plaster, jeepers, it was like concrete, I had to raw plug it, and I didn't want to do that really, but didn't have the choice. And hopefully be able to see this, the gap, look at that. I've got spaces in place to brace it. I didn't bother with that one, so we could see what the difference was more than anything. And then up the top, and then it touches, and then down to the bottom, and then it touches all the walls. So there's this panel in place. You can see a bit of adhesive on there. Oh, shaky hands. So a bit of adhesive on there, but that's fine. I am intending to paint all this white, I think. So I don't mind just filling in like the screw holes and stuff. I did nail it along there. It did kind of shift it a little bit, and a lot of crap fell out of the holes in the ceiling. So I don't know if that was a good idea. Probably won't do that ever again, but there we go. That's that. So up next is going to be two rails. They're going to be coming across there and there, so we can put the shelf on it next. And that's the next step. And here we are at this stage. So you can see how the supports are on there. And this time, I did screw them. Because I'm going to paint it white, I'm just going to use filler on those to plug the screw holes. And of course, put a coat hanger in place. So you're starting to see what it looked like. Now what we're doing is making the bit that's going to be there for the door to be put onto. And it's going to hinge upwards. So kind of figuring that out as we go along now. Howdy folks, 'tis a new day and the saga continues. What I've done this morning is I've just fit that shelf there. Nice easy little job, cut a plank of wood, make it fit. And then second plank of wood to make fit is the door up there, which is on the floor. But I've got two things to do. I've got to pop to the shop to get some hinges, a little door handle, and a bit of trim for down the edge there. And what have I got to do next? I've got to rewire this little wire here that goes to a light outside on the wall. So I've got to figure out where that goes into the electric box there, which I'm going to get Dad to help me with because he's better with the devil's magic than I am. And then figure that out. I'll cut a little hole in the door so that fits in nice and tidily, replace the wires because that's just old, horrible, painted, crappy wires, and then hang the door up there. In the week of an evening, I did put some filler in the little drill holes and stuff for the screws, but again, they've just really dried out. Stuff I use is horrible stuff. It just dries out, makes a big cracky pit, so I've got to do that twice. So sadly, I'm not going to get that painted today, but that's fine. I've got tomorrow morning to do that. So that's that. So here's this unfinished bit. Everything's loose. It's recessed a bit, so when I make the door out of the same material as the shelf stuff, that'll be nice and flush. Same with that. Nothing's fixed in place at the moment because I'm going to do some proper leveling up to make sure it's going to be square with the door when I make the door. And to do that, I need to sort out those wires, so I'll figure that out another time. In the meanwhile, I started in the shelves down here, and I decided because of the height of them, I'm probably only going to have one shelf, but we'll see close to the time. We'll make this shelf, and then I'll hang a coat and see how it goes. Howdy folks, 'tis a new day and the saga continues. What I've done this morning is I just fit that shelf there. Nice easy little job, cut a plank of wood, make it fit. And then second plank of wood to make fit is the door up there, which is on the floor. But I've got two things to do. I've got to pop to the shop to get some hinges, a little door handle and a bit of trim for down the edge there. And what have I got to do next? I've got to rewire this little wire here that goes to a light outside on the wall. So I've got to figure out where that goes into the electric box there, which I'm going to get Dad to help me with because he's better with the devil's magic than I am. And then figure that out. I'll cut a little hole in the door so that fits in nice and tidily, replace the wires because that's just old, horrible, painted, crappy wires, and then hang the door up there. In the week of an evening, I did put some filler in the little drill holes and stuff for the screws, but again, they've just really dried out. Stuff I use is horrible stuff. It just dries out, makes a big cracky pit, so I've got to do that twice. So sadly, I'm not going to get that painted today, but that's fine. I've got tomorrow morning to do that. So that's that. Well, here we are. It took a bit longer than expected to finish, but pretty much the whole construction of it's finished. This has got a little bit of bounce in it due to the cheap hinges, really, a little bit bent out of shape, but that's fine. I could fix it by recessing them, but what I'm going to do is, like I did on the doors over there, is I'm just going to get one of those little clippy things. I can't think what they're called off the top of my head, but basically like a little latch. So that's going to go in there and keep that closed. As you can see in there, replace that wire that was there, the old crap wire with a nice new grey one. And it turned out doing the wiring in the fuse board was really simple. It's basically like a complicated light switch. So that's nice and easy. I feel confident about doing them in the future. However, I'll just turn the big light on for this. So the only weird thing was this bit of quadrant I've used to tidy up the edge. Down here, there is pretty much no quadrant touching this wood. So what I've done was my dad did it for me because he was here, so I held the wood and he put the glue on. We put some contact adhesive on there, along the quadrant, that is, the bit that goes on the wall. So it's going to be held onto the wall. Hopefully it'll pin and won't just pull the paint off like it did at the bottom a while back. But we'll see what happens. And what I've done is, if I bring it in closer here, I did start to nail in, you can probably see one at the top. I did start to nail into the wood there to pin it into the wood just as a temporary piece, but down here it's just off the wood. There's barely a millimetre of this wood behind the quadrant. So what I've done is I've just pinned it in place with these nails, and all of these nails are just temporary all the way down to the bottom. And so what they're doing is just pinning it in place and applying the pressure so it fits with the curve of the wall rather than the straight of the wood. So hopefully that'll glue it on nicely. So I've run out of time really today because I'm meeting some friends shortly to do any painting on there. So I'll probably do a bit of that tomorrow morning before I go out. So I'm seeing some more friends in the afternoon, but we'll see how it goes. I'm not too worried. Overall, I'm quite pleased. It's exactly how I pictured it in my mind. The only difference is more shelves. So I've only got the one. I did intend to have 2 or 3, but that's fine. That's to do with space. And I made the spacing from the bottom to fit my work boots under nice and comfortably, and also if I get some wellies under there and stuff like that. So I don't really mind. I'm quite happy with that really. So what I'm going to do now is paint it, and that'll be that little project finished. Nice that. And then after that, probably going to be going on to the cupboards up in the spare room.